Working with the ACI command line interface. Okay, everyone. So in our last video, I would like to take a look and review the ACI command line interface. And it's very important for you to understand how the ACI CLI or the Apex CLI works, because there will be times where the information that you need to find it's not available in the GUI, or it's kind of convoluted the way that the GUI is structured for you to find that information. So it's faster just to log into the CLI and get that information right away. With that said, we got three menus or three sections in the ACI CLI. So we got the Apex CLI, in which we can see all the configuration for our tenants, all the objects, everything that you see on the GUI. It's available through the Apex CLI. So we can see the configuration from a tenant, from an object, from a policy standpoint. If we want to go into the fabric underlay or the operational aspect of ACI, including the Linux part of it, the second interface is the shell. So we have a mode that we have to set ourselves. So we type bash in the Apex CLI. Once we type bash and we press enter, we get into the iShell console. From there, we can do diagnostics on the hardware. We can take a look at the underlay configuration, meaning that I want to see what the underlay IPs for my VTAP addresses are, what's my pod number, and all that underlaying fabric information is available through iShell. And finally, if we want to find control plane or data plane information from the leaves and the spines themselves, we can attach and use the NXOS styles device CLI. So the device will be either a leaf or a spine. So we got one of those two. If we want to find, let's say, a route table for a particular tenant, we go into NXOS style. How do we get there? Under the iShell, so if you see the order, in order for you to get to the iShell, you got to go through the Apex CLI, type bash, and then you land in iShell. If you want to attach to a leaf and access the leaf or the spine in NXOS, like if you were just logging into any Nexus switch, then on the iShell, you type SSH leaf or device hostname -B, and then the Apex management IP, or I would say the underlay, the fabric addressing ID for that particular leaf, okay? So with that said, once we get there, we can then do some show commands and get the information we want. Very straightforward. It's just like working with your traditional switch, but you have to go through a third sub interface, right? In order for you to get to that particular section. And let's say we want to see the operational status and leaf 101 for a particular port. We don't want to go into the system and the GUI. We want to just grab the information real quick from the command line. We can do it this way. Okay, so let's jump onto a PuTTY session. Let me go ahead and console into the Apex, and we're going to go explore each one of them. Okay, so let me go ahead and log in. Username. Now you can see it's the Apex password, and I am inside the Apex CLI. Okay, we haven't gotten into the bash nor the NXOS. We're on the first interface, which is the Apex. From here, let's say we want to see the configuration for a particular tenant. Okay, so we can do a show run. We can find from here all the information that we want to see in regards to the configuration. So let's say we want to show run tenant, and then we press the question mark, and then we see all of our tenants. And let's say we want to see the configuration. How will that GUI configuration that you perform, the objects, creations, creating the EPGs, creating bridge domains, the VRF, everything, the contracts, how do you see that in the CLI? So let's grab, those are her tenants from the previous video. Let me see the web SRV farm, which I believe has quite a few configuration changes there. By the way, if you press the tab, so let's say we have web S. So if we just press W tab, it's going to land in the last character that is equal between those two options. and then we just decide which one we want. So in this case, we want to go SRV. We just press R, tab, and it auto-completes. Press enter, and this is the configuration for Web SRV Farm. So you can grab all this, copy and paste, and it will build a tenant. And it will build a tenant along with all those objects and everything. It's not meant to be used this way. However, if you want to do a change faster, this is the way to go. Okay, so we have the VRFs that we created in that tenant, the bridge domains, and absolutely every single thing. And this is how an interface is configured in ACI. So it's interface bridge domain, and this is how you allocate the IP address. It's quite different from your traditional NXOS mode. While it looks, the syntax kind of similar, it's completely different from a layout standpoint. So if you can see here, we have a shared address on the consumer side as well as the provider side. And that means that this must be attached to a contract, and that's why it's delegating this particular mode for each one, okay? So we have the database SRV, we got the bridge domain, and this is everything that is to know about that particular tenant. Like I mentioned earlier, we cannot show control plane information because the APIC does not handle the control plane. The control plane is handled by the leaves and the spines, right? So if we want to see a route table for a tenant, we have to attach to a particular leaf and then show IP route for that tenant VRF, okay? So with that said, this is how the ACI APIC CLI works. It's basically for you to see how everything's configured from an APIC standpoint, along with all your tenant configs, your objects, your policies, etc. Okay, now let's move into Bash. So we're going to go in the iShell, type bash, and now we are in the iShell. Through the iShell, what we can do, this is how we can find the fabric underlay information. So the information, once you first build that ACI fabric, if you want to know what the VTAP addresses for all your leaves are, this is where you look for that. If you want to see information regarding your APIC, this is where you're going to look for. And this is, we're talking about physical hardware information. So let's say we want to see the fabric status, okay? So we want to see the physical inventory or the physical aspect of the fabric. So every command regarding this particular section will begin with ACI diag as diagnostics, and then the command will be fnv read enter. There you go. So right now what you see here is my ACI fabric. I basically have two leaves and one spine. And you can see this is the VTAP address for each one. This was auto-assigned once we build that fabric in our first video, okay? Next, we want to see the configuration from the fabric itself. We want to see what the address is, what the pod number is, what's the management configuration. This is where we see it. What's the infrastructure VLAN, which is very important. If you remember what infrastructure VLAN is, then this is where we look for that. If you don't remember, I suggest you go to video, the section 1, and one of those videos we discuss the infrastructure VLAN, okay? So let me go ahead and see that configuration, ACI diag, AV read, okay? And we'll wait a little bit, and there you go. This is my fabric configuration. This is the APIC local IP in the underlay or the fabric addressing. This is my subnet or the block that is going to be used for that fabric underlay. And this is the domain. This is the name of my fabric. This is the address, like I mentioned to you. And basically, this is where we see from the APIC configuration standpoint, right? Okay, let's see if we can verify. Let's verify the status of the APIC. So we see if it has the valid cert from a licensing standpoint, etc. So we go ACI diag, verify APIC, and there you go. It basically shows me the certificate information and along the serial number and, you know, the status and everything. It's all green. Okay. Now we are done. You know, by the way, if you want to know what is available from the option standpoint in the bash, you can double tap. And it's actually asking you, do you want me to display all 1700 possibilities? Yeah, you press yes. And those are all the settings that I can go and look for information or configure or do changes, okay? This is strictly the underlying Linux operating system that handles the ACI fabric, okay? So there you go. App, JSON parseling, JSON verify. We have, iPerf, there you go. This is basically what I believe this is what ACI will do to do some bandwidth testing. There's quite a few modules here. And then we Control C. Now let's go ahead in NXOS mode. We want to attach to a leaf. Let's attach to leaf 101. Okay, so let's go ahead and type. We can do either attach. That's the old way of doing it. Now you should do SSH hostname -B and then my APIC address. And this is not the management IP. This is the underlay address for my VTAP. Now it's asking me for the leaf password, which is the same as my administrator password. And I am in NXOS mode inside leaf 101. From here, you can execute the same commands that as you go in NXOS mode. They're very similar. So let's say we want to see the route table for a particular VRF in a tenant. We do show IP route. And then we first type VRF, and then we start with tenant name. So in this case, let's do web SRV farm colon, and now the VRF name. So the VRF, and let's see if I can find that. Nope, I cannot. So the VRF name, it's web SRV VRF. Press enter, and this is my route table in that particular VRF in tenant web SRV farm. You obviously need to understand how the structure works or how the syntax works, because it's a little bit different from traditional NXOS, because in NXOS you don't have a tenant, you just have VRF and the VRF name, and that's it. In this case, you have to type the tenant name and then invoke the VRF name, okay? What else? We want to see show IP interface brief. And this is very similar to your traditional NXOS or Nexus switch. And you can see here, those loopback interfaces are basically the tab addresses for the underlay. This is the VLAN numbers that are auto-generated when you build a bridge domain. It auto-assigns a VLAN ID for it. So there you have it. I just gave you a brief overview. Obviously, there's a lot of commands that you can leverage and use to do troubleshooting or do configuration changes on the fly. So I will suggest you go into Cisco's knowledge base and take a look at that. There's some excellent cheat sheets over there with all the list of commands, and you just grab them and find what you want, and that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let's keep on going. Okay, everyone, we have reached the end of section 8. In section 9, we take a look at ACI management and troubleshooting. Thank you for watching.